really wanted to establish a visual motif of duality. Duality with the color, between sanity and madness, the light and the dark. In a lot of setup, you have something that may be like a warm window, but then something that's a little bit cooler. We wanted to invoke a sense of surrealism. We also wanted to evoke a feeling of claustrophobia. It's not just tight shots, it's also a place where Val retreats to her home. She's closed off. You'll notice like all the windows are closed, the curtains are closed as if she doesn't want people peering in. The two things that we really wanted to hit on was how do we establish a duality? And then of course the feeling of claustrophobia, which I really wanted to be more of a subconscious kind of feel. And the resources we had, we did a good job, I think, of displaying those two things.
Hi, I'm Jamie Hitchings of Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify their skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube channel. Every week, we interview a film professional, and this week, we're joined by Scott Siracusano, whose work includes The Box, Em and Selma Go Griffin Hunting, and Control Freak. We'll be focusing on Control Freak, available on Hulu. The film delves into themes of mental illness and generational trauma. And Scott, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Control Freak is your debut feature film as a cinematographer. How did you approach this project differently than some of your short form work?
So, I mean, first and foremost, it's the longevity aspect of it, much longer time commitment than short form work. So in the commercial space, music videos, and it's been short films as well, you're maybe seeing people for 3 to 5 days max or so. With this, it was something where, it was a 4-month essentially endeavor from when I got the call that I was being onboarded to when we called wrap and we were heading home from Kentucky. But before then too, this is like a longer journey for Shal and I, the director. This started as a concept short back in 2021, a while back. And, back then Hulu gave like a tiny bit of money to like some teams to make like a little anthology series essentially, where it's like each person had their own individual story that they were telling. And they essentially chose two. We didn't know at the time this would happen, but two shorts from the block moved on to become features. The other being Appendage, and then ours was the one to follow that up. And from 2021 until 2024, when we started principal photography, there was a lot of back and forth, red light, green light. It was basically like we're at an intersection constantly of like hearing the project's on, then it's off. And of course, with like the strikes and everything that was happening and a tumultuous time for the film industry, there's a lot of uncertainty going into it. So it was a lot of mental gymnastics that you had to kind of do. And for Shal, of course, it's more difficult because this is his brainchild. But not getting too attached, to it in the beginning, because there's always a chance it can kind of fade away. But you always hold on to that hope. And then I remember I was in New Zealand at the time for a vacation with my best friend, and we were in Queensland or Queenstown, and I was on the phone, and I get a call from the producer saying like, "Hey, we want to bring you on board. It's your first feature, but you have to pitch yourself." So first and foremost, first feature, it's a big risk, of course, to bring on someone that hasn't done a feature before. I fully understand what the studio was thinking and their concerns. I would be concerned too, of course. So Sham, the producer, gave me a heads up of kind of like what they were looking for and like things to bring up, essentially my pitch meeting. So I put together like a 40-page lookbook, which I'm more than happy to send over. But just kind of explaining kind of like, for one, where visually I saw the film going, and having shot the concept short, it gave me a little bit further ammunition. But I had to, I did like an hour-long pitch essentially, and kind of just like went in guns blazing, because I was like, I want to give them zero reason to doubt, that I'm the right man for the job. And luckily that ended up working out. In terms of like going into the production itself, prep was tough, because Kentucky, they have an amazing film incentive, but the hardest part of, when we were scouting, was finding a house location that for one fit what we were trying to convey with Val's character. And it was kind of slim pickings out there in the area we were at. So in prep, up until like, even like 2 or 3 weeks before we started shooting, there's a bit of uncertainty of where we were going to land with our house location. And the place we landed, I'm happy with like the results we got from that location. The house itself is very much a character and is very unique, and was the most unique looking place that we saw. But yeah, like, and then of course with shooting, we can go more into that. later, but leading up to the, us getting boots in the ground and being on set was almost like I mean, it's a job within itself. It's like there's a reason why they say prep, 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 prep. Prep is the most important thing that you could possibly do. And we did everything we possibly could to make sure we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's on that.
I've been a camera person for 30 years and I fell in love with cinema. I heard there was free film school in France and I wanted to get into the French film school. I really didn't know anything at the time, but I knew at least how to take pictures. So I said, I'll try for the image department. And then when I miraculously got into the French film school, I fell in love with working with the camera. You're following what's going to be in the movie. So that immediacy that the camera allows is what I loved from the beginning. I'm Kirsten Johnson, and this is my course about documentary cinematography.
Funny, I did not think I did not think the house was an actual house. Because it lended itself so much to the story, I assumed that it was a built set, but it was a house.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yes, yes, it was. It was
That was the perfect place for the film. Wow.
and it was the house in itself is a topic for sure. There were lots of challenges that came with the house as well. The house was actually like a smart home that was constructed in 1983. So think about the tech back then, a smart home back
Mhm.
then, and then that translating to now made it super difficult. So in prep, for example, I spent hours in that house because they have a system where it's not like, a normal dimmer, like you press a button and you slide the knob, right? That's how you dim lights up and down. Not in this house. Nope. Everything is custom programmed to the original owner. And so what I mean by that is you walk up and instead of one light switch, it's six, just on unlabeled buttons. And the only way, for example, let's just say we're in the dining room and I'm like, I want the chandelier to be on, but I want the foyer light to be off. It feels like I'm doing like Da Vinci Code or diffusing a bomb, doing pressing top left, middle right, top right. And that combination it turns the lights on. I still remember exactly what it took to like get the lights in a specific way. It was really bizarre. I'd never in my life had to have that problem, but also the importance of prep and being able to spend time on location. If I didn't have that time, oh my God, like we would have been scrambling. But that's just like one of the fun issues that we have with that location. Yeah.
As I mentioned before, the film explores themes of anxiety and psychological distress. How
Mhm.
did you use your cinematography to represent her internal struggles?
Yeah, so I mean, first and foremost, like going into it, Shal and I really wanted to establish a visual motif of like duality, so duality with the color, between sanity and madness, the light and the dark, and in a lot of setups, like specifically, like you'll notice, like you have something that's like maybe like a warm window, but then something that's a little bit cooler, and we wanted to invoke like kind of like a sense of surrealism, and in Song's room in the monastery, which fun fact, that's actually our production office. Because we couldn't find a location for that. You'll notice the big window is blue, but then it's like a cooler daylight sky tone, and then on the right it's a little bit warmer because of the shears that we had on. And we also want to evoke a feeling of claustrophobia throughout the film, where you notice like it's not just tight shots, it's also the place where Val retreats to her home. When she's on stage, she's very open with the world, right? She's very open of who she is and this and that. Come on in, I'm open with you. But when she goes back home and retreats to her sanctuary, she's closed off. You'll notice like all the windows are closed, the curtains are closed as if she doesn't want people peering in. And the only time that you really see those things open is when she is in control herself. For example, when the yoga scene, when you see the blinds raise up, there's this brief moment where she allows the world the hands on her, like she opens herself up, and then quickly, very quickly, when the ant appears on her leg, closes that back off and retreats back into her cocoon, so to speak. So, the two things that we really wanted to hit on was how do we establish a duality, and not have it be too in your face where it's like, will the audience understand? It's more something that I like, we could sneak in and see if you pick up on it, but not detracting or distracting you from the story. And of course, the feeling of claustrophobia, which I really want it to be more of a subconscious kind of feel. When you're watching the film, you're like you feel enclosed and you have that feeling that something, in the same way of like being in a small space, you're like, you don't feel comfortable, you're finding beauty in things that otherwise not be beautiful, essentially. And yeah, I think like all things considered and the resources we had, we did a good job, I think, of displaying those two things.
Yeah, I noticed when she was on stage, the lighting was obviously much different stage lighting, but when she was home, it was the cinematography was so much closer and the lighting was completely, yeah, as you said, completely different. And yeah, the stage almost, to me, the stage almost felt more comfortable than her home in a lot of ways.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You mentioned the ant that
Mhm.
appeared on her leg. It's my understanding that you, while on set, there was the use of practical insects, and then you also worked with a VFX team, correct? Can you
Yes.
explain a little bit of that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So Travis Button was our VFX soup, and he led the team at Hyphenate, which is amazing VFX studio in LA. It's a small team of people, and they did such an incredible job with this. Like I have to give hats off to Travis. Like he was essentially like my right-hand man through all of this. Like it was very important for, at least when he was in the space, to make sure we allocated time for HDRIs, doing the chrome ball shooting, and doing everything so that we get the realistic the 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 lighting to be like realistic, when it translates into the VFX. With the practical ants, that was like more of like the first week or two, and it was the first time I was talking about this yesterday. uh, I never knew an ant wrangler existed until this film, and so we did. I think Sam Chapson, the first AD, of course, we have our safety meetings at the top of every day, and especially before the ants first came to set, and it's kind of like this. He did a really amazing job of like we have to maintain our professionalism, of course, and the first thing too is like the safety of the ants. No ants were harmed in the making of this film, but it is kind of like you're smiling a little bit during the safety meeting because you're like talent's flying the set and it's 30 ants, and like those are the stars of the show. And having these safety meetings in the morning where, it's those moments of clarity where it's like, oh wow, like talent is going to be these ants that we're bringing to set, which I always thought that was pretty funny. And the way that we work the real ants though is like there's a method with them where if there's a specific temperature, a cooler temperature, they're asleep, and then they wake up. So, there's pheromones and things that you can put on the ground that there's like a specific path or direction you want them to take. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they're ants, there's not much you can do to control them. So we would have to block out a pretty, like, all things considered, is not a lot of time in the grants, like when you look at it on paper, but when you look at the whole day, like we allocated a lot of time to have to film these ants practically. And this was like an homage, essentially, in a way, to the original film, because the concept short, because it was Shal and I in our, our backyard filming ants on a probe lens, and then like he's putting them on his chest and his arms and stuff. Like the neighbors are probably looking out the window being like, what the hell's going on over there? But uh, so it's working with the practical ants is something we want to incorporate into the feature. But the problem, of course, is the time. There's never enough time in any film, no matter what budget level, but especially on this, it was like packed back to back. Everything had to be very precise, and if it wasn't, then it cascades into the rest of the day. And with the ants, we quickly realized, like, and we always knew this from the beginning, but it's something that we experienced firsthand, where we're like, okay, we have to really be like strategic about where we can, essentially deploy these ants. Like, what scenes we really need them in, because Sam's there checking his watch, and I am too, being like, this is taking a long time, and like we need to figure something out. And later on, I think there's really like three. I think there's three scenes or four scenes that use practical ants in the whole film, but the rest was working with Travis to figure out, like, okay, like what kind of lighting and also framing would work so that we can still sell that, like, so it doesn't feel completely artificial. But for the night, or the nightmare scene in the home office, the ants and everything, that the one that have spoilers or anything like that. insane scene. Originally that was supposed to be, of course, not her spitting out. Ants were not supposed to be practical, but the first ant crawling out of the glove and going up the arm and stuff was originally going to be practical. We tried to shoot it that way. We even had, of course, Shal, unintentional homage to the beginning of when we shot the concept for it, but he decided he put on Kelly's outfit and sat on the couch, and like we did like a close up of it crawling across his chest, and it just didn't quite work. So that was kind of like the night where we're like, okay, we need to re-examine using practical ants for this.
I intentionally kind of stayed away from the information about the film until I screened it. And when I found out there was use of practical ants, I was like, I need to ask him about that, because that just sounds like it would be extremely difficult, which it sounds like it actually was.
It was, but first
Ants
time
are
for
on different
everything.
time than we are.
Yeah. I mean, if I ever do it again, like I think I know what I would probably, what we would do differently. But I think we made a really good call of kind of pivoting away from going, even half of it being practical,
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's the nature of production, though. A lot of times you do
Mhm.
have to pivot.
Mhm.
So staying on production, it's my understanding that you use the ARRI Alexa 35 camera. Can you explain a little bit of your workflow and why you chose that camera?
Yeah, absolutely. So Lexa 35 was something I had used like a year prior on some short form projects. And I was always very impressed with, of course, you get the extra stop, in the highlights. And in situations where, we didn't necessarily have control of the highlights, I saw a huge benefit of us using it. I mean, I was, trained on an Alexa Classic in college, and I had always been used to the Alexa workflow. And we had tested out the Venice, and we're thinking about potentially doing that. There was a Sylvester Stallone movie that was in town, and a bunch of films that were really busy. So looking at the practicality of like the size of the Venice, even if you go into Rialto mode, we were like, the 35 just made more sense for having the extra, latitude essentially for the dynamic range. But also, the body itself is already fairly compact, and based on what we were having to do, it just made the most sense. And the workflow with it just made the most sense as well. But yeah, the 35 is an amazing piece of equipment. Like nothing but love to ARRI. Like I'm a huge ARRI boy for sure. I always will be. And it just felt like the right tool for the job.
Can you, the Control Freak, obviously you've been involved with it since it was a concept short. Were there specific visual references that you were tuning into, maybe when it was a short versus when it was a feature, or references in general, visual references?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to like what I was talking about with like a lookbook, I wanted, like, with me, I am very like particular about, for one, making sure we're all on the same page of crew, of course. And so my like the lookbook that I had usually designated like for maybe not necessarily a specific scene, but a specific scene setting, exactly what we're trying to hit. And so the main reference I would say, like for the film in general, was really like kind of Shape of Water. I would say like Dan Lawston's work was something, especially for The Dry for Wet, was something that I really look to for inspiration, because The Dry for Wet, oh my God, technical challenge in itself. And, we don't have the budget to shoot underwater, as most productions don't. And we certainly don't have the time, as you've heard from my aunt's story as well. And so in prep, I had to essentially figure out like, okay, on a shoestring budget, how do we make this 7 foot tall, creature, and Kelly and all of her family be underwater, you know, in an area or a part of the state where there aren't any really sound stages that are available to rent. Um, and you just have to kind of figure it out, like in like an empty warehouse, like how do you make this work? And so looking at Shape of Water and Dan Lawson and his work on that, and looking at BTS and asking Andrew Draza, Palermo, and Gul Parad and Pal Robinson, some other peers of mine who are fantastic cinematographers, for advice. They gave me uh, kind of like pointers of like what to do, and also like things to look out for, and most importantly, pitfalls to avoid. So Shape of Water, I would say, not only for just the Dry for Wet, but just how they handle a lot of the tones inside of her apartment in that film, for example. I really, really resonated of how that that kind of felt, and you can kind of see like hints of that in Val's workshop, for example. It's like, you kind of have like this putrid, like kind of like warmer tones that are mixed in with like this green, and especially like when she's with the Sanchi at the end, and it's super close and tight on the 75 mil Cook Speed Panker, which warms things up as it is. Like that, I think kind of hit, and it was kind of like it coincided with what our original references from Shape of Water were. And of course with the Dry for Wet. For when he's in the shower, which Robbie's in the shower doing his thing. That is John Wick. John Wick was my main inspiration for that. There's like a classic shot that I feel like I've seen in so many lookbooks, and my lookbooks included. And it just like a super simplistic setup, but it ended up being like a frame that really like resonated with me. But I would say those are the two references that really jump out as like, yeah, for sure. Like that was something that was like derived from someone else's work that inspired me.
Probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. It gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career.
Getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, and being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now. Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.
As soon as you said Shape of Water, I thought of the workshop almost immediately. So
Amazing.
thank you
Amazing.
for, yeah.
Of course.
I was like, this, yeah, totally, the colorscape totally reminds me of it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Of course.
So reflecting on Control Freak being completed and out in the world right now, is there any particular scene that you're especially proud of? And if so, why?
I would say, and I'm trying to figure out how to dance around this spoiler wise, but there's a climactic moment where she's in the workshop and involves a hand with the thing. And in prep, when we were pre-visiting, there was one shot that I really wanted to evoke something with that, and I think we did a really good job. It was the slow push, slow zoom, of like, will she do it? Will she not do it? And in prep, we had to do originally we wanted it to be like a 3-minute long take, a 3-minute long zoom where we're just holding on the one shot and going in as she's trying to figure out whether she's going to bring the saw down or not, and to do that thing that she's wanted to do. But I think we did a really amazing job of like, it's really intense, we're close, and then we cut out to this moment and we give the viewer a break. And I think you can feel it where it's like you have a sense where you're like, and you're slowly pushing in, and she goes up to it and she doesn't do it. And you kind of really feel the emotion of Kelly, and you're not hiding it with like, with cuts, or you're going around or heightening. You're just there in the room with her, and you're slowly zooming in, and you're feeling everything that she's feeling, and just like the anxiety build up. It always resonates with me whenever I watch that scene. And I think that, even it got whittled down to 60 seconds, which I think ultimately was probably a good call. But oh man, it was a scene where I truly felt like, okay, cool, this was like an original idea that made it through, and was something that was kind of a brainchild from Shal and I, and I think it was incredibly effective, and it felt real. And Kelly's performance in that was just so visceral, and I really just love kind of how that moment, like right before she brings the saw down, turned out. And yeah, I would say just the workshop in general is probably my favorite setup as well. We had such a fun time in there. Every other house, like, part of the house, I could tell you a story where it was like something happened with like, the smart home misbehaving, or like, the lights not working in certain areas, or uncontrollable, windows of, X, Y, and Z. But that was the one place where I was like in the house where we had full control of the lighting, full control of everything. And we just had as we're all also where a lot of the action took place. We had the blood effects, we had the saws, we had prosthetics, we had, a 60-second long zoom. We had a lot of things happening in there. And I would say, like, even though I specified that one scene or that one moment, dancing around the spoilers like a ballerina, I love just how, like, the workshop turned out. I think Haram Borges, my gaffer, and Josh Alam, my key grip, like, we just did such a good job. And of course, I give a shout out to Michelle Patterson, our PD, because the lights that were overhead of all of them were originally just regular garage lights. And so on the day, I wanted to be able to control the spill, so they were able to, like, they put, like, essentially like this wrap that was around it to help control the light, and it made a world of difference. But yeah, long-winded answer, but hope to answer your question.
Those are the best answers.
Yeah.
Just speaking about the workshop as a viewer, it was introduced relatively early on.
Mhm.
And I can't just step back and be a viewer all the time, because I was trying to look at this critically. I was thinking, this is going to play into the story somehow. I don't, because she was just putting around down there for a while, doing her
Yeah.
thing. I was like, we're coming back here. I don't know how we're coming back here, but we're coming back here. And just to comment on the editing of that, I, as the viewer, needed to come back to the wide. Like, I needed that. I'm so glad that it wasn't a 3-minute push. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I got a break. And then, and
Yeah.
obviously, the action continues. But yeah, I, as the viewer, was like, ooh, that was much needed.
Yeah, it feels cool. I mean, it's nice because it kind of felt like I was, like, visually playing, like, the strings of whatever instrument we were presenting to the viewer. And it was nice because I was like, you can previs even before you shoot, of, like, how that's going, like, how is this sequence going to feel? Like, what do we want to evoke? In my opinion, like, there's so many pivotal moments in the story, and of course, like, there's some crazy moments. But for me, visually, I was like, this is something where we can really play with the viewer, and we can really kind of, like I said, like, operate the instrument, and make you feel something, that anticipation. It's like going up on a roller coaster. It's like, are we about to drop or are we not? Or that thing that rises you up and you're not sure when they're going to release you, but it's coming, you just don't know when. Is it going to drop? And then all of a sudden, bam, it does. And so that was, like, kind of like what, I get all giddy because, like, I'm like, wow, it really felt like we were in control of that visually, and it came through on screen. So anyway, yeah, thank you for appreciating it.
No problem. Yeah, that was an intense scene for sure. So I'm going to ask you a final question. And my final question is, Scott, what is your guilty pleasure film or television show? It could be something that you kind of return back to all the time, or something you just enjoy and watch anytime you're traveling or just at home.
Yeah. So I haven't returned to it necessarily, but the first thing that really came to my mind, it was this TV show called The Last Kingdom, which was on Netflix, which, like, my really good friend that I've known since, I even before I wanted to be a cinematographer, I went to college with him, Dalton Price. Him and I used to stay up, like, and we were roommates. We would stay up at, like, 1 or 2 in the morning, and we were, like, perusing on Netflix, and we're like, we're huge, like, sci-fi and fantasy nerds. Oh, there goes my dog. Sci-fi and fantasy nerds. And we love, like, medieval times, and we also love, like, pretty much anything that involves swordplay or anything like that, all about it. And we came across a show called Last Kingdom, and it was just like, it's so silly. Like, I think it's objectively not an amazing show. But I really, really, it's just fun to watch. And I remember, like, those late nights, like, where we would just watch that show, and there's, like, I forget how many seasons they are. It got canceled. But I just really enjoyed it. There's certain things where it's like, I think it's really important where, yes, you should be watching, of course, the films that bring you inspiration, and there should be films, obviously, that you're watching to better yourself as a filmmaker. But I think, like, the films that aren't good, or the shows that aren't good, are sometimes just as important too. And also just kind of, like, letting yourself go, and not being pinky out all the time, putting the pinky down, and then just enjoying something.
You'll need a little
And
junk food every once in a while, right?
yeah, exactly. Junk food is a great word. I would say another thing too. I would say movie wise, I don't think I probably might not watch this ever again. Um, but Megaopolis I saw. I'm not sure if you've seen that.
No, I've
Coppola's.
heard things about it, but I have not gotten a chance to see it yet.
It was the most fun I had in a theater in like last year. Like we went there with a bunch of friends. We knew it was not like gonna be a good film, but that just made it so much more fun. The whole theater was like kind of erupting a bit, and it was just just a fun experience, you know. And like I said, like the same thing I said about Last Kingdom, like the guilty pleasure aspect of it. That was also fun. So anyway, I would say those two. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Really appreciate it. It was lovely talking to you.
Yeah,
And that's
likewise.
it for this week. You can check us out at filmmakeru.com or follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_you. I'm Jamie Hitchings, and thanks for watching. And thank you, Scott.